Okay, welcome back to, I guess this is episode 2 of the Cooking and Fishing podcast, but I have a very special guest today, and he really needs no introduction. I'm pretty sure that the Venn diagram of our respective audiences completely overlap, meaning his is much bigger than mine, and you guys have all probably spent the last few years watching his videos. And it's Chris, aka Seamoney. And Seamoney recently moved up to Rhode Island, or I suppose a couple years ago. And we're going to talk about fishing in general, certainly with a focus on fluke fishing at some point in the conversation, but mainly just to see what he's been up to. We're going to touch tuna fishing, I'm sure. He also got into cobia fishing, among other species that we're going to cover. So anyway, without further delay, here is Seamoney. Have you been fishing or?
I have just ice fishing,
Right.
but now the ice is melting, so
Yeah,
open water.
I never got into that. In fact, I've watched your videos ice fishing in the past, and I've gone as far as buying a couple of ice rods. But then beyond that, it's like, like people would invite me, but just the thought of sitting in front of a hole is but it looks
Yeah,
fun.
it can be fun. It's like very boring when it's not
Right.
happening, but I've tried to eliminate, the boring times.
Yeah, and the last time I messaged you was when you put up that short with the livescope,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yep.
And to me, like, as much of a problem that could be in open water fishing and ice fishing, it has to be, because I was watching videos of guys basically drilling 2 or 3 holes and landing right on top of the fish,
Hmm.
right? Because you can drill one hole, put the deucer down, pan it around, find the fish, and just walk off that distance.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
probably a great advantage. I've only used it those couple days my buddy brought it. And it wasn't like we needed it because there was fish everywhere. So
Right.
it was real cool to see. I mean, as much as it sucks, like it still does teach you a ton of stuff about the behavior of fish.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But
I
at
mean,
the same time, yeah, it definitely makes it easier. But I don't know. It's one of those things.
yeah, the thing stopping me from getting one for my kayak is mainly I don't think I'll make a blind cast ever again.
Yeah, right.
Because I was fishing in freshwater pretty much like very finessey horizontal stuff to begin with. So if I can
Mm.
see my bait and the fish, it's like, I mean, that's pretty much what I was watching this morning with the Elite Series down in Florida. Like even these very shallow fisheries, everyone is scoping, even for fish on beds, they're
Mm,
scoping, because some of those deeper bedders that are in 8 to 10 feet in that tannic water, like you can't see them,
right.
so they're using their garment on perspective mode and just sight fishing off a live scope.
Yeah.
Um,
It's still kind of sight fishing without
yeah.
seeing the actual fish.
I mean, it's sight fishing 100% of the time if you want it to
Right.
be, right? It's like
Right.
like every time you make a cast, you're looking at your bait and how fish are interacting with it.
Yeah,
So,
you're not taking casts out into the desert with
right.
that. You're just moving till you find them.
Yeah, I mean that was what fishing was, right? I mean, you never really know if a fish is there or if they're looking at your bait or how you have to work your bait, it's yeah, it's a brand new world. But I did ask you about tuna fishing because I know you're doing that a lot up there now.
Mhm.
And do you know if people are using livescope for tuna?
I don't know for sure. I'm
Right.
sure. I mean, I don't know how the live scope works. Like when it's on the trolling motor and you just pan around and you see what's in front of you. But like if it's on your boat and it's like fixed to the hull of your boat.
Well, it would have to pan around. Like you would need some kind of separate pole or something to spin that transducer around. Otherwise, I don't,
Yeah.
because I don't think. you you can do it like turning your entire boat.
Right.
There's
Yeah, I don't
there's
know how that works, but probably someone's doing it.
right. I mean,
But it
in
would be cool to see.
in terms of just the mechanics of tuna fishing, because I know nothing about it. Like, do they move too quickly for you? Because I know in bass fishing, those fish will kind of sit there. Like if you're fishing for suspended smallmouth underneath bait balls, like they're gonna stay there for a good while,
Yeah,
and you
right.
can stay on those fish. But tuna, like, are they just constantly zipping in and out of your sonar screen?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
just show up as one quick mark and then they're gone. And I think
right,
that they do have to swim. I don't think they can just sit
right,
still. Maybe they can like hang in some current. There's some current, but I think they're
yes,
just like constantly swimming. I think that like 5 miles an hour, I've heard, is like their comfort. Like them resting is like swimming 5 miles an hour. So you'd probably see them on the live scope, but I
right.
mean, not like you'd be able to like,
Like target individual fish, like
yeah,
individual tuna in like 150 feet
I
with
think
like
there'd
a.
be like schools you would be seeing. I don't know.
I mean, I would imagine if they can see a 2-inch minnow on a jig head, and like 3 pound bass, the marine units like you have to be able to see 150 pound tuna and like a 6 ounce
Oh
hurley
yeah.
jig or something,
Right,
right?
right.
So if you can like pan out and see a school of tuna, say 80 feet away and 100 feet down, and then you can see your jig hit that, say, 65, 70 foot zone, like above them. And then
Hmm.
you can probably see if a fish will come up and eat it.
Right.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's, yeah. I'm,
I mean, enough guys have trolling motors out there. You could put it on your trolling motor. I'm sure people
yeah.
are doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
I just haven't seen it. Yeah.
um, but
I wonder how well the fluke show up on live scope.
yeah, I was thinking about that. Like,
I'm sure you can see them when they're moving.
yes, when they're moving, I mean, now they will have to come off the bottom.
Yeah.
But I think in a couple generations of the technology, you can probably see them on the bottom.
Mm.
But even now, you could pull a crankbait, or just as long as you can see your jig or your
Mm.
bait and you can keep it 2, 3 feet off the bottom, you can see if fish are coming up for it, for sure.
Yeah. Right.
Because all you need is like 4 or 5 inches of separation and you can see it.
Mm.
And that's just gonna get worse and worse. Like right now, I think what's separating the top guys is those guys know, like, they can understand more information when they're looking at their screen than like the
Mm.
middle of the pack people. But
Mm.
when they incorporate more AI into like interpreting all that data, it's gonna be like, that's a bass, that's a carp,
Yeah.
that's a walleye. Like it's gonna even take that aspect of it out of fishing.
Mm.
So I yeah, very interesting times. So just to recap a little bit, you used to be based out of Philly.
Yep.
All right, so all the classic Seamoney videos, those were mostly like South Jersey, Philly type of
Yep.
stuff when you're fishing locally.
Yeah. Yep. South Jersey, Eastern PA, Jersey,
Right.
all around Delaware,
Delaware. Yes.
stuff like that.
And when did you move up to Rhode Island?
2020.
Okay. All right. That sounds about right. Like I know you kind of took a break a little bit from uploading videos,
I did.
and then you
Around
picked,
COVID time when everyone started fishing, I
yeah.
just like was seeing people fishing everywhere. And I was like so not about that that I was like, I'm not posting any videos. Like,
I mean,
not,
it's there's like an inherent conflict because obviously you enjoy making videos and you want people to, share your experiences and learn techniques and stuff like that, but you probably want them to fish somewhere else,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah, I mean, there's like tons of spots,
Yep.
but obviously some spots are better than others. And yeah, I mean, you don't want like a whole gang of people going to exactly the same place you fish and doing exactly the same thing you do, you know. So, but like every time you upload a video, you have to assume that's gonna happen and, be willing to accept that. So either don't post the video or be willing to accept that like the spot might never be the same, but you know, there's tons of spots. So,
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And I remember we were chatting a long time ago. You deleted some of your videos, and I was like, well, where'd those videos go? And you explained to me that it's not just spot burning in terms of spots. It's burning the idea. Like
mhm,
you were going for a certain species at the time, and just just you uploading a video gives people the notion that, you know what, they can do that too. And if they can recognize a spot, then it's over.
mhm.
But there are some fish that are so pressured or they're so few in number that you don't even find that a risk worth taking by uploading the video.
Yeah, right,
Yeah. No, that
right.
that's I mean that's the age we live in. I never really got into striped bass fishing because
Mhm.
most of what I see is it's blitz fishing and people getting in on the action and just I mean I guess it seems like it's getting worse every year.
The crowds.
The crowds and just the way people find their spots is all like sort of instant live social media spot burning.
Hmm.
And I just can't picture myself like joining that lineup.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, blitzes and whatnot. For every blitz, I mean, think about how many places aren't being fished though. For like,
Right,
yeah, there's a lineup at like Island Beach State Park, but I mean, no one's fishing for like 50 miles of South Jersey.
right.
So, I mean, it really is up to you. Like, do you want to go battle the crowds for the blitz, or do you want to go, like, you can go striper fishing anywhere?
Right. I mean, the fall run, I mean, once they start kind of spreading out, I would imagine the chances of them showing up anywhere is probably equal, right? Because it's
Yeah,
not
I
really
mean,
based on anything, like they're not holding on structure, they're just after the bait.
right, right.
So if the wind direction changes or the wave changes and it pushes the bait close, I mean, that can be anywhere along the coast.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, once they get south of Barnegat Inlet, they just like stop coming to the beaches. But like there are occasionally blitzes in South Jersey, but like if you want a bass blitz, yeah, you got to go north of Barnegat Inlet, you know.
I mean, I guess the beaches south are a lot shallower. They're a lot flatter. I know
They're
that
shallower
just,
and flatter, but I mean,
but
it's
there's
just
no
weird.
reason.
It's weird.
Right,
It just
right,
like doesn't happen down there. Delaware, like there's no blitzes in Delaware. Like
right.
Maryland, like
I
you
mean,
have deep water right off the shores of Delaware. Like,
okay,
you know, just
but it
doesn't
doesn't
happen.
happen. But I wonder
Doesn't
if it's that whole section of flat landscape that kind of breaks up that pattern. I mean, I have no idea. I can
I
just
don't
tell
know
you
either.
that, like fluking at Island Beach State Park and LBI is very different from fluking out front in like Sandy Hook. Like Sandy Hook, you have that deep lip,
Hmm.
like almost all like if you're willing to wade out to like knee deep water, you can be casting into like 8 or 10 feet.
Right.
Whereas at Island Beach State Park, it's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes if there's cuts, that kind of form, but most of it is much shallower than that. And,
Mm.
and then very small changes in the bottom could hold like 4 or 5 fish. Like a small 2 foot kind of hole down in South Jersey would be like a prime spot to be casting over and over again.
Yeah.
But just back to the whole spot burning thing a little bit. Do you find that you are playing around with the timing of your releases a lot more once you like if you care about that particular fishery,
Mm.
then you don't want to be posting up like the first day of tog season,
Like the
like
timing of the release of the video.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
for sure. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, like when the stripers swim into the Delaware River, like you don't want to go out there and like the first day that's good, like
right.
just blast it, you know? Like, but that's what happens anyway. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. Like you can only do you, and everyone else is just. But
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it's I don't know, certain areas I like to call it like institutionalized. Like there's certain zones that are like
they're
institutionalized
like
where like the
community holes.
DOD for stripers, like you
Right,
fish bloodworms in sacks and like, but then there's like 30 miles of river up and down river of there that's like not many guys,
right.
And yeah, I mean, you're not gonna outfish the guy fishing like a bloodworm sack, fishing like
I don't even know what that is. Like, is that
they
bloodworms
put
that they put into
bloodworms
like a
into
sash?
mesh sacks
Okay,
and fish like a ball of bloodworms.
like fishing for catfish with chicken liver or
Chicken liver
something.
and stockings, yeah. Yeah.
And that's the way to catch them when they're in the river.
In like the flats of the river.
I
Yeah.
see. I see.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I've heard about that up here in the Hudson too. That once they come in the river, it's mostly a bait game.
Yeah, it's mostly a bait game. I think it's just because there's like few fish, If there's a time where there are a lot of fish, like you could get them on plugs and whatnot, but for the most part, it's like just a few fish at any given time, and like you're gonna stand there and plug all day, and like
Right.
the water's dirty, you know. But
Yeah.
you go into like, different areas, and yeah, I mean, like you don't have to use the bloodworms. Like a lot of guys chunk once you get,
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, to me, that's almost the same. Like you're throwing out a piece of bait and you're basically just waiting.
Worming and chunking, yeah, like just
Yeah.
soaking bait, yeah.
I want to ask you, speaking of bait, the last few fluke videos I watched from your channel, you were getting into like that old school dragging rigs a lot more. Now, it is that for YouTube content or do you find it,
No,
yeah, like actually more effective?
more effective.
Okay. I can actually see that, especially after I went out with John Halkias on his boat up in your area and
Mhm.
the amount of like small sea bass and all kinds of stuff that you have on the bottom.
The interference fish, right? Yeah.
Yes.
The thing is like everyone wants to jig the fluke,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is, if you throw the jig, like you just get covered up in, I call them shit fish,
Yeah.
There's just so
Right.
many little fish down there that are going to eat your jig.
Yes.
And it's like much more just trying to avoid getting those fish, getting through those fish to get the fluke.
Right. And it's
So,
not like those fish don't eat a strip. It's just that you can wait through those bites if you have a strip on. Versus like at least for me, I can't tell the difference, especially when I was trying to work like a half ounce jig in like 90 feet of water. Like I feel a
mhm,
bite, I'm setting the hook.
mhm.
Like I'm not gonna feed it to them, but I would imagine if you have constant pressure on that sinker and you're dragging it behind the drift, you can tell if it's like a small sea bass or sea robin pecking at it versus like a
Yeah,
fluke bite.
right, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the strip, like if you're using a mackerel strip, for
Mm-hmm.
example, like all the fish are gonna eat the mackerel.
Okay.
So that's not like if if the fluking's good and there's like a lot of fluke, I mean, then like yeah, maybe a mackerel strip's good. Or if there's like not many of those fish. But I really like mackerel strips for a couple years,
Right.
and then like the past couple years, not so good, just because all those fish were on it.
Okay.
So it's like you almost have to use like fluke belly. Like the little fish don't like the fluke belly nearly as much. Like there's hardly any
I mean,
like
there's probably less oil and scent.
yeah,
I mean, fluke has virtually no fat content. It was
yeah,
just
it's
a piece of
very
meat and skin.
right. And I don't know why, but fluke love eating fluke belly. Like
They do.
I don't
They
know.
do.
why that's such a thing, but
Yeah,
that's like,
when I used to do a lot more party boat and charter boat fluking, um, I would get bored with jigging, and I'll experiment. And I mean, this is very limited kind of knowledge on bait for fluke, but I remember the dark side when I make a little dark side like meat sandwich,
hmm
of like fluke strip. That would get me like the larger fish
hmm
than like the single white ribbon. But I'm
hmm
pretty sure it's illegal to use a dark side now. I don't think you could.
Well, every state's different. So in Rhode
Yeah.
Island, like you can bring fluke bellies from the day before
Oh, really?
and use them, but you can't
Okay.
do that in Jersey. I don't know
No.
what New York is, but
Yeah. I mean, it
Jersey,
makes
you would have
sense
to
because,
catch
yeah,
the
yeah,
fluke and keep the rack at least. Like,
yeah. Because how else would they know? Like you can't measure a belly strip. You would need to measure the actual fish that it came off of.
yeah,
It's funny watching you go through different strips and like the spinner rigs. I mean, it's just so old school. I mean, it's
it
almost
is.
retro fishing in a way, where you're driving, because all you see now is gulp. I mean, for literally the past decade, right? I mean, since Skinner came out with the high-low jigging stuff,
hmm
every fluke video is some version of that. But then watching you like catch a bluefish, stripping it up, and then like the bead and bucktail
All the,
rig is, I mean, it's fucking amazing.
all the jewelry on the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I jigged, like jigging was the way I fished for fluke
Right.
for most of the time that
Yeah.
I fished. And then I don't know, something switched where I became like a rig guy
Yeah. Well,
just in the past couple of years.
but let me ask you this. If you're fishing, say, under 30 feet in your kayak or boat, are you still dragging a bait rig or are you casting around a jig at that point?
And both.
Both.
I'll jig, you know,
Right. Right.
like if I'm shore fishing for fluke, probably like,
Yeah. I mean, you're not casting a three-way from shore.
nah, well,
Okay.
sometimes I am. So the you know how people use the high-low rig? They fish
Yeah.
like a 2 ounce sinker with like two gulps above it
Yeah. In like
on the
5 feet
beaches
of
and whatnot.
water.
Yeah, so I was against that for like forever.
Yeah.
But since I've started using the rigs again in the past couple of years, I do that now from time to time, like from shore.
Yeah, I mean, once you set the proper distance from your ball sinker or whatever you're using and like the top two hooks, then it doesn't really matter how heavy the weight is. I mean, that's the primary reason people use that rig.
It's easy.
It's easy,
It's easy.
because your depth control is basically automatic in terms of how far it is off the bottom.
Right. It's
You know,
automatic. Right. You don't have to
yes.
think. I
Right, because
mean,
if you're using like a 1/4 ounce jig, which is what I use like 99% of the time,
mhm.
you need to know where your jig is. Like indexing your jig in the water column takes like some degree of concentration and like
For
knowledge,
sure. Right.
But if you're throwing out like even a 3/4 ounce, like you're just on the bottom.
Yeah.
Like it takes work to get a 3/4 ounce weight off the bottom when you're fishing like a sloping beach.
Oh yeah. 3/4 ounce. You might as well just you're fishing the teaser at
Exactly.
that
And if
point.
you don't have a teaser, you're probably not catching much.
Yeah, you're
You're
just gonna like
yeah, because the
you'll still
fluke
catch a couple, but
you
you're not
will, yes,
yeah, you're not
yes.
gonna do too well.
No, because like I always say, fluke they live on the bottom, but they're always feeding up. So
hmm
that zone you want to be in is really 6 inches off the bottom to like 3 or 4 feet, depending on water clarity. But
hmm
you don't really want to be on the bottom. Like they're not built to turn sideways and like a striped bass, or any normal round fish, they're much more at home pinning things to the bottom.
hmm
Like a striped bass eating a lobster is like a smallmouth eating a crayfish. Like they're tilting down and they're
Yeah,
looking at that thing and then they're pinning it right against the bottom. That's not how a fluke eats at all.
right.
Like a fluke's got two eyes on top of their head. Have you ever used dogfish strips? Like I used to read about that a lot, how it
I've
lasts
used
forever.
them. Yeah. I mean, I'm not too big on them,
Right.
but I've definitely used them, caught with them, but I don't know. Actually, one thing I was thinking recently
Mm,
is how at Block or like here in Rhode Island, like the dogfish move in really bad
right.
at some point in the summer, usually like, I don't know, mid-June, July, and you can't fluke fish because, or like certain areas, you can't fluke fish because there's just too many dogfish and they
Hmm.
just are immediately on your jig or whatever. And I was thinking like maybe dogfish strips would be able to like pull a fluke out of like wads of dogfish.
Right. Because your theory is that it's some kind of dogfish repellent.
Maybe,
You
and
know.
if the dogfish don't eat it,
Right.
then it would probably work.
Right. Exactly. Like it doesn't have to repel them. It just has to like keep them from actually eating it.
Yeah, like if you can get through the dogfish, there's fluke down there, but
Right. Right.
a gulp, any like those dogfish, the spiny dogs, like they're eating everything. Like if you
Yeah.
have to move, you have to leave. Like I remember like really good fluke bites one weekend, and then the next weekend, like there's no boats there. There's no you're like, where'd everyone go?
Yeah.
And not
And if
gone.
you're the one person that can figure out how to keep the doggies off your bait, then you're golden.
Then you're golden. Yeah, if you could
Yeah.
figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I haven't
I mean,
tried I haven't tried the dogfish strips out there, like when the doggies are in.
right, right. I mean, that's convenient too, because when they're in, you can catch them for
Yeah,
stripping, right? So it all works out. I mean,
it
I'm
all
very
works out.
curious to see if that. I mean, that would make such a great video.
I'll have to try. I will definitely try.
Yeah, and everyone out there is jigging high low 6 inch gulp. I mean,
Yeah.
that's got to be 99% of people out there.
Yeah.
As
And it
I get
works. I mean,
yes,
obviously
yes,
it works.
yeah, it definitely works. I mean, that's one thing I mean, I always knew this because even though 90% of my party boat stuff back in the day were in the bay, I would go out with those mates on their boats and we'll fish like fluke tournaments offshore. And I'll do
Mm.
my half bounce, cast out in like 80 feet of water and I'll catch, but there's no
Mm.
more advantage. You could get a light jig down 70, 80 feet, but you're only casting like 80 feet. So just the
Mm.
physics of the, like, by the time your jig hits bottom, your boat's almost right on top of it.
Yeah.
And then you get a few bounces past the bow of the boat, and then you have to do it again. It's like that stuff works when you're under 35, 40 feet.
Hmm.
Like that kind of horizontal, pretending a fluke is a freshwater bass type of fishing. But once you're out in the ocean, it's like it stops making sense.
Yeah.
It's a
I
lot
would
of
go
work.
up inside, like when I used to jig, or when I do jig, I still do, but if you're like like if there's no drift and you're
Hmm.
casting, like a lot of times I would use like a 2 ounce,
Right, right. Right,
just see.
because then you're at least getting away from the boat and you're creating some movement on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you can cast it out there real far. It gets down quick. But
right.
then one thing that happens if you do get a bite out at the end of your cast, there's so much scope in your line. You go to set the hook and like you don't stick the fish.
I
Like he
mean,
pops up after a few cranks or
yeah,
so nowadays, if I'm like on a party boat and there's no drift, I'm casting. I just cast. I mean, we call it the low rig, which is just like the same thing as a high-low rig, just one hook.
okay, yeah,
So like one teaser on like
right,
a 3 ounce sinker.
right.
And like if you get bit out at the end of your cast, I'm always just like the fluke's not going to spit it out most of the time.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah,
you're just like trying to get the slack out of your line, like reeling, popping your rod tip, like getting the slack out of your line. And then once it's like getting tight, then you
yeah.
get the hook set.
I can tell you what I learned in front. I mean, not what I learned, but just what I see people do. Like they do exactly that, but no popping of the rod. They don't move because they don't want that
They just
fish to
reel
feel.
into it.
Yeah, they just reel like they're basically pointing the rod at the fish, and they
Hmm.
reel until they feel like that rod tip starts to load, and
Right.
then they set the hook because you don't get a second chance on that hook set.
Hmm.
And
Sometimes you do. Not
sometimes you do. Yeah, if
usually.
you're fishing like 80 feet of water, you do.
Sometimes those flukes are just so they just they'll you lose them and they eat it again.
Dude,
Like,
dude, you reminded me. I have to ask you. One of your favorite videos is that fucking fluke that popped off in the wash, and then you put it right in front of his face, and it ate
and
it again.
it ate it again.
That's
That
you
was
know,
like pretty ridiculous. Yeah, I
dude.
mean,
Since seeing that video, I've tried to recreate that scenario like every chance I get. Every time any fish pops off, I'll put it in. That never happened to me. But I mean that was, and when it happened to you, I remember you were like, "That's the reason I wear a GoPro to capture
right.
like shit
That
like
yeah, that's
that."
never happened since. And like, yeah, I'm gonna if I lose a fish right at like in plain sight, I'm always gonna try to like put it in front of him again. And yeah, he never eats it. That fish, who knows? That one
I
was
mean,
just
like it must be. I mean, that to me is like the definition of a reaction strike,
you're right.
right? Like people talk about that, but I mean, that's it
That
in
was
the
the definition of
fluke.
a reaction
Yeah.
strike. Yeah.
Like that fish was so stressed out being pulled in. I mean, fish obviously don't know what the fuck's happening. And you must have put it in front of his face like at exactly the right time.
Yeah.
And it had no choice but to open its mouth and suck in the jig again.
Right. And he like swallowed it. It was crazy.
Yes.
That was a lightning strike. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys, just a quick announcement. I just added the jerkbait crankbait fluke lesson to the website, cookingandfishing.com. So if you're at all interested, please check it out. Thank you. A lot of times, the bigger fish, you need to make them react to a bait. Like if they're neutral and they're not feeding, that speed and like direction change or something is
Hmm.
really what you need to get them to bite. Speed more than anything else. Um, you know,
To
like
trigger the
like
bite.
yeah, like a lot of my jigging now, especially if I'm in deeper water, like I'm jigging off a pier, if it's anywhere more than 10 feet, instead of doing like the pop and then letting the jig glide, which is
Hmm.
like that's how I jig on beaches, right? But now if I'm jigging like a jetty or a pier, I will pop it like 4 or 5 times. So that jig is almost like 10, 12 feet up in the water column. And
Hmm.
then I'll just give it slack and just let it like free fall, just drop straight down. And a lot of
Hmm.
times I'll catch so many more fish doing
Hmm.
that than like kind of hopping it on the bottom, gliding
Hmm.
it, and doing all that. Because, and also when you're fishing those spots, you're making the same cast like a few times, right?
Hmm.
So those fish were there, but they weren't
Right.
reacting to that slow, methodical jigging. Like
Yeah.
they wanted that thing like flying off the bottom and then just crashing right back into their face.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
so that's yeah,
The
but that
reaction strike.
all right. So I wanted to ask you, would you say tuna fishing is like your current main project in terms
Mm,
of because all right, so here's what I noticed. You would go through kind of phases of being obsessed with certain kinds of fishing. Like I remember your Cobia trips, which were
yeah.
epic. Like that whole series was fuck. Like you went down there in your kayak like 2 or 3 times, and then you started meeting people, I guess.
Right.
I mean that stuff that looks like insane fishing to me.
Yeah.
But
Cobia.
yeah, yeah, and we can talk about that too. But just in general, like, do you find yourself going through like I know you have like a short musky phase, like certain fish just kind of catch your attention, and then like there will be a whole series of videos on that. Would you say
Yeah.
tuna is like your current project in that
Sort
sense?
of. Yeah. I mean, if I have the opportunity to go tuna fishing and it sounds like the tuna fishing's good, then I'm gonna go. Like that just I'm
Right.
not gonna go for a different fish
Right.
that
Like you're not going fluking if like the bluefin bite
yeah,
is
probably not.
yeah.
But like this past season, for one, it was the first time I had my own boat and was able
Right.
to do it on my own terms.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of times like the tuna bite wasn't that good, especially after a certain point in the morning, and then you can just go fluke fishing the rest of the day.
Right.
So like I was definitely all about combo, like start with tuna and then go for something else.
Right. So I mean, again, I wonder if, if and when you ever get a live scope, instead of that, you'll just go scanning around for like the loose pods of bluefin that are still in the area.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean, I would definitely be hoping to find some kind of excellent fish if I were to ever get live scope.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Cobia
nothing.
fishing with live scope.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's a game. I mean, cobia fishing, as far as I can tell, you're literally scanning for fish like physically with your eyeballs,
Yeah.
right? Like,
If you're
are
sight
are you
fishing
ever
for them.
blind casting for cobia, or is it
You mean if you are in a zone where there's cobia and you take a blind cast, like you're usually going to get a shark. Or like no, like blind casting, no, you're
right,
not.
right?
Like only maybe like one time I was on a pier in Virginia and like as I was walking out the pier, someone caught like a dink cobia on their high-low rig with squid. And like that day, like those high-low rigs with squid caught like 20 dink cobia. And I
Okay.
went out there like hoping to sight cast cobia. Like I had the bucktail or whatever, and like I was gonna, you know, I started blind casting and just jigging the bottom, and I got like two dink cobia,
What's the thing? Like, what size are we talking about?
like 20 inches, 24
Okay.
inches,
Right,
you
right.
know, dink. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
but there
Small.
was one 40 incher caught like on a whole squid that day.
Right. They've been caught pretty regularly up here.
Yeah,
Like the last
they're
couple of
there.
years. Yeah,
They're
people
there.
like off of Staten Island, which I can't really wrap my head around that. To me, they're like
Staten
an
Island or
old
Long Island?
Staten Island.
Both.
Yeah, both.
But
Well, I mean, if you go far enough west, like you basically, like you're in the bay, but it's a
like the back of the
continuous.
Raritan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not that far back. Those guys were probably fishing closer to like the Verrazano.
Okay.
So you have Ambrose Channel. I mean, it's still pretty big
Yeah.
water there.
Yeah. Huh.
Um,
Yeah, I could see how that could be a zone. Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy. Like from like Monmouth County to like Long Beach, New York, like that whole like mouth of the Raritan area. I mean, I
yeah.
don't know if it was always like reliable for cobia or if
People
people
say. I mean,
just
people
started
say
figuring it out.
different. I mean, anytime people catch a tropical species up here, or even just a southern species, people will be like, well, back in 1870, there used to be red drum all the way up to Arthur Kill, which might be true, but they usually say that in the context of nothing's changing. Like we're
Hmm.
all alarmists for pointing these things out.
Hmm.
But that's become such a part of people's identity that you can't really get away from it. But anyway, I mean, yeah, I'm sure like Sheepshead Bay used to have a lot of fucking sheepshead.
Yeah.
Like all the Spanish mac that are pretty regular now
Right.
in like New York and Jersey,
Right.
where I don't think that was a thing ever. You
No,
know,
it wasn't because like I was into those Spanish when they showed up thick,
I
like
remember.
2022 or something,
Yeah,
20
yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah.
that was. It was like a couple years where there was Spanish everywhere. It
Yes,
was like every inlet in New Jersey had them,
yes, yes. I
and it's
mean,
not like
it, it, it was consistent for like a
yeah,
month, like people were filling coolers with them.
right.
Uh,
And in years prior, like you'd hear of one here or there,
yeah,
but it was like there was feeding fish with birds, and it was just like all bluefish.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
So,
that was the year I caught my first one, and I made that into a catch and cook video, and I
hmm.
called it like climate change catch and cook. People lost their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Like the DMs I got from that video. Now, Cobia up in Rhode Island, is that a thing or
There's some, I
okay?
mean, I looked this past season and I didn't see any. Like there were times where like the cobia senses were tingling and I didn't really fish for them too long, but I mean, I was looking and like
Right,
I
right.
didn't see any.
There you
But
go. Live scope.
you really have to dedicate yourself to it. You can't
Yeah.
just like, stop and try real quick and like expect to just
Yeah.
see
So
one as
so
soon as you get there.
so traditionally the Cobia guys like they're literally standing at like the tallest point in their boat and they're
Yeah,
scanning.
towers. They're
Right.
on the tower.
Right.
They're looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And then those fish they don't shy off when you approach them with the motor running and like into casting distance.
If they're not pressured, they'll swim to your boat. Like they want the motor,
Yes. Yes.
like they're always swimming to the boat.
Isn't that weird? Like, what other? Because I noticed when I first started the vertical smallmouth stuff, every time you go over a pot of fish, they'll come up to your boat.
Yeah.
Like, I think they see that shadow, and their first instinct is that's a cloud of bait fish or something.
Yeah,
You
maybe
know,
so.
yeah, like that's something that worth going over to check out. That's
Right.
interesting that cobia
They like
actually.
noise, I feel like, and
Right.
vibration and stuff. But I mean, like down mouth of the Chesapeake, like they get pressured pretty crazy. And then like it gets really hard.
But back to tuna. In terms of tackle, I see you using what seems to be pretty light tackle. What's your leader and braid setup for the most part? Like if you're targeting a certain size class fish.
Yeah, it seems like every year there's just a different class of fish.
Okay.
So like one year it was all 50 to 60 inches. There's always giants, but like you don't fish for the giants if
Right.
you
So
don't have
so
the permit.
50,
Right.
60
So
inches is how many pounds? Like
that's
roughly.
like 70, 90 pounds,
Okay.
60 pounds, 60. I don't really know.
Right,
I never
right.
weighed one,
Right. But under a
except for
hundred
like these
pounds
little ones.
probably.
Decent size, good size.
Right.
And for that, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to use less than like 80-pound leader.
Okay.
Maybe 60, 100, 60, 80, 100
So 60 would be considered light for that
for
class
if
of
you're
fish.
targeting like 50 to 60 inch fish. But
Right.
then this year, most of the fish that were around were small, like they call them rats, like 15 to 25 pounds, 30
Okay.
inch, 35 inch. Like that was mostly what was around this year.
Interesting.
And with that, yeah, I think the lightest I would use was 40-pound leader, 30-pound braid. And
You
like
could probably
that
go
was
down
no
to 20
problem.
pound to land those. I mean,
You could catch them on some light stuff.
right, right.
Like the
But the
fight's not that
speed,
long.
yeah, but the speed I wish they travel, like the drag setting has to be, I mean, your drag has to be smooth mainly because of the speed. Like
Yeah,
n not as much the actual like weight of the fish, but
right.
you
A 20-pound fish can swim really fast.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So, and then like I went down to New Jersey and I fished for those like early winter tunas.
I saw
And
that video. Yeah.
yeah, those are all big. Like you're just as likely to catch a fish over 73 inches as under 73 inches, it
So
seems like.
73 inches, that's like a couple hundred pounds.
That's probably so. Again, I never weighed it
Right,
and I
right,
don't fish
right.
for
But
those fish. But yeah, maybe like 150, 200 pounds,
yeah, that's
something like that. I really don't know. That's
right,
a fish that like I don't have much experience with.
right.
But for those, like my buddy, he was targeting those fish, fairly regularly, and I think they were using like a 250-pound leader, you know,
Man. I
something like
mean,
that.
how all right, so my question is how big does a tuna have to be for you to feel like when you're fighting that fish, like you're putting your whole body weight against that rod. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like are we talking like a 50-pound fish or does it have to be like closer to 80 pounds for you to feel that like full body?
Say like 50 pounder, like probably like a 45-inch fish. Like I remember like we were catching a couple of these like 45-inch fish this year. And like my buddy Lucas was fighting it unconventional and like he was leaning into it pretty hard. He was like sitting on the rod.
Right, right.
Like, you're putting some heat on him. Like you're leaning into him.
Yeah, that's something I've never experienced and I definitely want to before I just physically couldn't do it. I mean, there's no way.
Yeah, I almost wish I was younger doing that stuff because like it's really
Yeah, I really hate hearing you say it because I feel like the window has passed for me and that now if I hook into, a 50-inch plus tuna, like it could do some damage. And
Yeah,
and and I could like, give up the rest of my
70
fluke
incher would
season.
do some damage.
Yeah.
50 incher, like you could do a 50 incher, like that's no problem.
Yeah. I mean, it
You
depends
know,
on the shape you're in, I guess. But,
yeah,
if all those ligaments and tendons aren't used to be like that
right.
looks like a lot of pressure you're putting on those fish because you don't want that fight to go on forever. Like you
Right.
want to do it as short as you can if you're
Fast as
releasing them.
possible.
Yeah.
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 That's why I like the smaller tunas, you know. I mean, like I
Yeah.
love albies, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Because they look like a fun fight, but,
Yeah,
you're not killing yourself.
right.
You
And
know,
like I don't really want to, I'm not selling them, so like if I was selling them, then I'd
well,
want like
yeah.
as many big ones or whatever as possible, but like you're just kind of going out there for fun
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like
And speaking of which, you do charters now? Like, are you booked way out or?
this season, no, I mean I'm not booked way out, no.
Okay. Okay, good. So we'll leave all that information because, I definitely think that the tuna fishing, was it always this good around here or around where you are? Or is this normal? Like,
I don't know. I think it was not as good as the past 4 or 5 years.
okay,
I think they've made a comeback. Like the bluefins seem like they've definitely made a comeback
right.
to the point now they have loosened regs on them, like charter boats, party boats. They can keep like 8 or
Yeah, yeah. Which,
15, like
right.
some number of them.
So, in other words, when the population rebuilds, people get to kill more fish. And the government actually monitors that and they can loosen regs just as easily as they tighten them.
Yeah.
I just had to put that out there because so many people say the exact opposite. The when you when you're casting into whales and dolphins, like do those dolphins ever take a jig or
Those dolphins, like I don't know how, but they do not like they might touch your line or something, but like
uh
you just never hook one.
some of the scenery in your tuna videos is just remarkable. I mean, it's like Nat Geo.
There's a lot of life out there if you can
Yeah,
find it. Yeah, there's a lot of dead water, but there's pockets of like amazing life for sure. And I mean, humpbacks are another thing that I mean, we're seeing more humpbacks now than like any time in the last like 100 years or 50 years, because they were
amazing.
hunted at some point and there was like a lot less.
Well, yeah. I mean
And
that.
now I mean, they live a long time. So now there's been like a life cycle or two since they stopped killing them. I don't know exactly, but there's
Yeah, I
more
mean
humpbacks
that.
around now than any time in the
There's
last 100.
humpbacks like in the Raritan Bay, like in the back. I remember
Yeah,
like a couple winters ago. I mean, it was next to like the
yeah, like
Arctic.
Perth Amboy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
There's
saw
like a
that.
humpback whale back there. I'm like,
And that's where if that's where the bunker is,
yeah,
that's where they go. Like they'll come right up to the beach. I mean, there's so many whales on the beaches of New Jersey
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
Crazy. And tunas. Like when was there ever so many bluefins, within a mile
yeah,
of the beach in Jersey, in New
yeah.
York?
I mean, it's definitely a success story. Although you don't really know what's behind that success, right? Just like when
Yeah,
stocks fail now, it's like there could be like 10 different reasons why, and usually
right.
like a combination. Like people say with cod, it can never recover because yes, it was overfished, but it coincides with the kind of climate change they can't really rebuild.
Yeah.
Because it's that combination that makes it so difficult. And same thing as like winter flounder inshore,
Mhm.
where like just at the
Need a
point where,
very precise temperature to
yeah, so
successfully.
apparently with the winter flounder, it was overfished to the point where the population collapsed. And then they put in very strict regulations, but apparently now that the water temperature is like a fraction of a degree warmer, the
Mhm.
crab and shrimp eggs would hatch before the winter flounder eggs. So the
Mhm.
predation got flipped. Whereas
Mhm.
before the winter flounder larva would like be feeding on those baby shrimps and like crab eggs. Now it's like the crabs and shrimps feeding on their eggs.
Interesting.
I mean that's one theory that I've read, but that's another travesty where people used to fill buckets and now there's like none. You know, like they're
Yeah.
basically extinct. And I saw your video. You were out there winter flounder fishing. It's just fucking hilarious. I mean,
Yeah.
you caught
They're
some.
there. I
Yeah.
mean, they're there. Here in Rhode Island, you can't fish for them in like half the state. You can't even target them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like all of Narragansett Bay, you can't target them, and then like the one big salt pond, and like in Point Judith, and then there's like a few square miles that are surrounded by breakwall. Like you can't target them in any of that, so you can only fish for them in the ocean, or like in like three other salt ponds.
Right, right.
But
Interesting.
I don't know, they're there. There's
Yeah,
just like there's
yeah,
not enough to like warrant going out there.
yeah. And there's probably not
Like
enough
more of a
to.
novelty to catch
Right,
a
right.
few.
Yeah. I would
And
love to get into walleye fishing.
that would be right up your alley.
Yes, yes. But I remember my impression of walleye, they hit surprisingly hard. Like on a jig. It's like a very percussive, like boom,
A
right? And
good
then
thump.
after that, it was like almost no fight.
Yeah, they don't fight too hard.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah. But
They're hit
I'm,
or miss though. You know, the thump. Sometimes it's
yes,
hard thump,
yeah.
sometimes it's nothing. It's
I'm,
kind of like a fluke.
I'm willing to fish for them just for the hard thump. But you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I mean,
They're
it
like
is like
probably the most similar to fluke as of like if you compare like freshwater to saltwater, fluke to like a freshwater fish is mostly like a walleye.
interesting. Yeah. I
The
don't know
teeth.
enough, because I always make the comparison of fluke to smallmouth rather than largemouth because they're almost always game to eat.
The
Like,
smallies are.
yeah, like largemouth gets moody, the weather changes. They're like, fuck this, I'm not eating for like 2 days. I mean,
Mm,
fluke, I mean, look, we're not fishing for fluke during their spawn. Like, there's no post spawn fluking. Like,
right.
by the time we're seeing fluke, like, they're here to eat, like, they're
Right.
here to fatten up for the whole summer and fall. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, but walleye, I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of it is so far away. Like my drive even out to like the Delaware is like it's too fucking far,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm also like the opposite of adventurous when it comes to hiking, wading, like none of that. Like I bought my first pair of waders this winter, and
Oh yeah.
and I did go to the Delaware River, and the wading itself was okay, but climbing down to the water, like I almost took a header. I mean,
Mm.
I'm not very athletic. This whole like hiking into like
Yeah.
wilderness spots I see you guys do is like very alien to me.
It can be
Yeah.
adverse for
But but
sure.
but that's what you have to do. Like you've caught some nice walleye. Just wading,
Yeah,
rivers and stuff.
that's it. The rivers, they're a lot easier to catch in rivers than lakes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Like
like I lived very close to walleyes when I lived in Philadelphia, like the art museum. That's
right.
like pretty good walleye fishery every year, like this time of year, pretty reliable, you know. So, like there's not much else to catch like right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
that's kind of always
are
like
they
number one.
shallow this time of year?
Pretty shallow. Yeah. Yeah, like less than 15 feet. Yeah, a lot of times if you just shine your light in the water, you'll see them sitting there in 3 feet of water, like their eyes
Right.
reflect.
Right. I
So
mean, like I know at night, but that was my next question to you is do you mostly target them at night?
yeah, some places they bite better at night, some
Hmm.
places they bite better in the daytime. So like the art museum, definitely a night bite. Like you can catch some in the day, but like you're always going to do better at night. But like the Delaware River, you can kind of catch them both.
Right.
But, like the day bite is usually good enough that you don't have to go out at night.
Yeah, at night I'm not coming back alive. There's no way I could
Yeah,
navigate
you gotta
any of that stuff at night,
know your
but
spot for sure.
I
Up
mean,
here, the only walleyes are like stocked Connecticut state walleyes, and
are the walleye in the Delaware not stocked or are they
they can naturally produce, but I think they're
really?
also stocked.
Okay, yeah.
It's like a good combination of like wild.
Yeah, it's like supplemental stocking
Yeah,
and yeah, most fish that can't reproduce in the wild, like I just don't have much interest. I mean, I guess that's more like I have a thing against landlocked salmon in New Jersey because they seem to just be putting them in every fucking lake without, I mean, even lakes that are extremely healthy and balanced, and they're like,
Hmm.
let's dump a couple hundred of these in there and see what happens. I'm like, bro, you're anyway. That's a pet peeve of mine. But
Yeah.
in any
I never
case,
fished for them in Jersey, those salmon.
yeah, I've
But
caught some like I'm pretty sure I caught the state record and released it, and then another guy, like the guy who ended up catching it, did.
really,
Yeah,
no shit.
because mine was like a big male, and you know how they get really gross looking when they're males, like the hook jaw and the whole body, like their head is too small to
Hmm.
fit their body, and then with that big hook jaw. But anyway, who knows? Like I've caught some big salmon smallie fishing for
That's,
sure.
I would like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it, but at the same time, it's like, I would mind if I know for a fact that they're messing with my smallmouth fishing. But now with livescope, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
all
it's all,
twisted up.
yeah. But I tell you, on 5 pound fluoro, those salmon will take you like a minute,
Yeah.
like you're not, because you can't horse them in. And if your drag is even the least bit sticky, like you're not landing those fish.
Hmm.
Like smallmouth, you have a better shot because they're not as fast. Like I feel like pound for pound, smallies are stronger, but the salmon are because they'll change direction so quickly.
Yeah.
That if your drag just like sticks at the startup, it's game over at
Hmm.
like 4 or 5 pound line. So
Hmm.
all right, so what's your season like in terms of your charter business? Like when do you ramp up, or are you still
I mean, I'm gonna be looking for those stripers to show up. That's first thing, like end of April.
okay?
Then I'll hopefully start right then and there.
So
And
striped
then
bass end of April, and then I assume fluke and tuna after like
yeah,
spring,
stripers are kind of here all season.
right?
Fluke are kind of here all season. Tuna are, that's gonna be tough because the weather, you can only go when the weather is prime,
Right.
like I'm not gonna go out there when it's shitty and
Mm-hmm.
like most days are shitty. So that would mostly be like short-term booking
Right.
kind
That's
of
like short notice
have like a
booking.
list, a call list.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because if I was trying to book tuna trips, like 1 in 8 would sail probably.
Right.
That's
Right.
like it's
Yeah.
always shitty out there
Yeah.
these days.
But if it's shitty out there, you have can you still usually find places to hide from the wind and fluke fish and stuff like that,
Yeah,
or
so like Narragansett Bay,
okay.
yeah, so like Block, like yeah, I don't go to Block if it's shitty either.
Right.
But Narragansett Bay is like a big zone, and then like the mouth of the bay, like you can't really hide from a south wind,
Yeah.
but you can hide from any other direction.
Right.
So
Right.
unfortunately, south is the prevailing wind in the summer, so
It
but,
is.
like it blows harder in the afternoon, and like Narragansett Bay never gets that rough,
Um,
and the
what
fishing's
is
like fairly good in there.
right, right. What is your opinion from last year? Because the fluking with the ocean temps were so low.
Yeah, it was like interesting. It was weird, like pretty weird fluke season, bad, you know.
Yeah,
But they say like they blame it on the south wind, but I mean, in Rhode Island, like a south wind creates upwelling, right? On like the Jersey, Delaware, like those south to north facing areas.
right.
But then the east to west areas where that blows water in, that's not upwelling.
That's not upwelling for you guys up
That's
north.
downwelling, right?
Right. So are you seeing higher water temperatures or normal water temperatures
Seems
during?
we didn't get like this past year, it didn't get as warm as like prior years. Prior years, it was like 75 at
Mm-hmm.
peak, 76. This year, it like rarely got over 71. But like right off the bat in June, like as soon as I started taking my boat out there, like it was in the 60s, which is probably pretty normal.
Right. So
And
maybe the water temps are still a little bit lower than average, even up there, even though the south
maybe
wind
so.
doesn't directly affect you guys.
Yeah. I
In
don't
terms
know. I
of
don't know
like,
exactly how it all works. Like I always thought it was weird how south wind upwells your Jersey Shore when like that, I don't know, like blows water parallel to shore.
Yeah, I mean, there are days when it's literally 95 air temp and you walk into the water and it feels like an ice
Ice.
cube. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot more often last year than I've ever experienced it before.
Yeah,
Um,
it did seem exceptionally windy out of the south.
yeah. I mean, like I feel that's certainly that's what I hope the problem is from last year's fluke season, because if that's the case, then it's just random and it can recover next year.
Right.
But who knows? I mean, it was an interesting fluking year for me as well, but um, I caught fish, but I had to travel. Like there were spots where I could go before and I mean, it might not be lights out fishing, but if I spent 8 hours on the beach, I can probably catch a limit. But last year, some days there was no chance. There were weeks where it was just like that was just not happening.
Yeah.
Every fish you catch was like 11 inches.
Hmm.
Um, and then other spots I went to, I couldn't catch a fish under 18, 19 inches. So I would catch a double or triple limit, and not a single fish was under 18, which to
Wow.
me is like from
Pretty weird.
shore, that's almost as alarming. Like like
Yeah.
like the size structure is just out of whack,
Yeah.
you know.
It is all kind of hard to say exactly what's happening, but for sure the Fluken used to be better
Yeah,
than it is now.
yeah. I mean, it's yeah, but hope like I was talking to John Houke, it's like when we had our podcast or live stream, Montauk was not having a good season.
This past season.
Yeah, this past season. But he figured it out. I mean, that's what you guys do, right? It's like you if there's fewer fish, the guys with more knowledge and who put in more effort, fewer people get on the fish, but there's still enough fish for those people, you know.
Hmm.
But do you have a website or
Not yet.
not yet? Okay, so people just DM you.
We'll be having a seamoneyfishing.com soon.
Nice. Are there gonna be okay? Let me ask you this: Are there gonna be Seamoney fluke rigs?
I thought about that. I've thought about that so much, and it's like I don't want to hand tie fluke rigs for like just a little
No,
money, you know?
no. But I think, Chris, I mean, if it's actually a rig that catches fish for you that you think is special, then I think you should think about it, because why not? I mean, there's so many people selling garbage like all over the
Oh yeah.
internet, right?
Most of the stuff is garbage.
Exactly.
And it's like 7.99 for like,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah. Like if
garbage
if
rig.
if you're able to use quality fluoro, but most importantly, like to me, like I sell those stupid little blades, whatever. I catch
Oh
fish with
yeah.
them. Like
You what?
like I catch fish with them. And
Right.
then I show people in the videos, here's a 7 pounder I caught from shore, here's a six, here's a triple limit. To me, that's the only way to do it. Versus
Hmm.
like, okay, now I have whatever 500 followers, let me try to take their money by selling
Hmm.
whatever the fuck, right? It's like if it's
Yeah.
something you actually believe in that works for you, and you can show them the results, then dude, see money fluke rigs. I mean, that's
I,
like different colors, different.
yeah.
I
Different
mean,
styles.
that's
Yeah.
what the winter's for.
That's
Tying,
true.
it's like why not?
Rigs. I did at one point like put spinner blades on the high-low rig, like above the
Okay,
skirt, and it worked really well.
dude.
And it worked so well that like I didn't even put it on YouTube for like the first year or two. I was like, I'm not gonna burn this rig. But then I stopped caring,
Yeah, yeah.
because it really doesn't make like, you know.
No, I tell you, like the spinner blades that I use, it definitely works. It's somewhat situational because
Mm.
there are times I don't want to use it. Like I told you earlier, when I'm doing that kind of more aggressive, like free fall jigging off piers and docks, I don't want to use that because I want that speed. Like when you put a
Mm.
spinner blade in the back of that gulp, like it slows it down. And
Mm.
when you pop that jig off a slack line, it doesn't get as high off the bottom, and most importantly, it doesn't have that like explosion of speed.
Mm.
But when I'm fluking off beaches now, just walking the beach and throwing that jig out, I'm almost always using that blade because to me it's like there's flash, there's vibration. I feel like fluke are so visual, and
Yeah.
like why not? Look, none of it is scientific. Like you would need to go back in time and make the exact same cast to the same fish to be like, all right, that fish not gonna eat because I don't have a blade on there.
Yeah.
But I mean that's fishing, right?
Right. There's a
Um,
million different ways and like different
exactly.
things you can use to catch them. But that's just another trick that maybe, some days it it works better. Who knows?
Yeah. And also like you get used to feeling the feedback from that blade through your rod tip.
Hmm.
Like I almost find it easier to jig with that blade in the back when it's windy, because I can feel when I pull that blade spinning and you can feel it
Mm-hmm.
against your rod tip and you're
Hmm.
locating your jig just a little bit better. Um,
Interesting.
but yeah, but I'm telling you, if you like Fluke do love blades, it's
Yeah.
blades, flashing things.
The spoon, like that's a pretty popular like drag rig. Like people
Yes,
drag
the
spoons off the
Viper
boats.
spoon.
Yeah,
That's the
like
original
that's
one, right? The Viper spoon. And the
maybe I don't know what
yeah,
the original one
who
was.
knows?
I don't I like think of them as M3 spoons, but
M3, yeah, is that okay?
maybe they copy. I have no idea.
Who knows? I mean, it's
I
a
don't really
spoon.
use them too much. I know that they work. My buddy, I mean Lucas uses them, and you know, I know they work. They
I mean,
definitely.
does that spoon create a lot more drag on the bottom?
It's like I don't know what it's doing down there. I think it's like darting around, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
I think
probably
it's like
twisting up.
darting
Yeah,
with left to right kind of thing.
yeah, it's doing. I mean that. I mean, especially on a party boat when there's 60 fucking baits down there. Like, why wouldn't you try to do something to kind of
Something
stand
different.
out? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I also think back
Times.
then
Mhm.
gulp worked better.
Yeah, right. I feel like Gulp did
Yeah,
used to work better.
gulp was magic the first few years it came out.
Yeah, I think they've kind of caught on,
Yeah,
you know.
I think my pet theory is there's been enough generations of fluke in terms of actual like selection pressure where we've removed all like the crackhead genes from like the fluke pool,
Maybe so.
and
That's an
like
interesting theory.
obviously they're all attracted to gulp,
Yeah,
but in terms of a population, there's going to be some that are just like a lot more attracted. That they'll come
right,
like 30 feet once they smell gulp juice in the water versus 10 or versus 5. And I think
right,
those
right.
fish we've removed from the population,
That's an it's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
right?
I
Because I mean
remember
that's
at one point after like jigging gulp for years, I was like not doing very well
yeah,
with it. I was like, this fluking sucks. But
yeah.
then I'll put a strip on a bucktail and like start catching fluke again. And it's like maybe,
No,
these
I'm
fish
telling you
just
because it's not the same as freshwater pressure. It's not like catch and release pressure, like you're
right,
dealing
yeah,
with
catch and
with
keep.
largemouth. But you're literally think of all the thousands of gulp that are down there every day, every body of water, and you're removing like so you're making the assumption that the fish that are most attracted to gulp um, are getting to those baits first, right? And then over years, and the reason for that is because they have whatever combination of genes, and
Hmm.
now those genes just aren't there anymore. And
Hmm.
because when gulp first came out, they were shitty. Like they had no action. I remember pulling fish out of the Western Sound on those rental boats
Hmm.
with like the squid gulp.
Oh
And
yeah.
that thing had no, I mean, it was
That was
like,
my least favorite of the gulp. I
yeah,
bought like one pack and
yes, dude,
didn't
but
catch shit
I
except
caught
cow nose
so
raised
many
and then
fluke back
yeah.
then, with no electronics, nothing, just
You
fucking around.
remember the 7-inch jerkshad?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was my
That was my
favorite.
Ambrose bait. I caught a
Yeah,
lot of big fish on that thing.
I don't know why they discontinued that one.
Yeah, but I actually managed to get a couple packs of that a couple years ago, and we tried it from the surf. It's just you can't generate the speed because it's such a big bait. It's not like the 6 inch jerk shad plus an inch. It's literally
Mm.
like almost triple the size and mass of a six
Yeah,
inch jerk shad, you know.
true.
So you can't like I mean you literally need heavier gear to throw it. Like you
Yeah,
can't just use like your freshwater drop shot rod to throw that
true,
bait,
true.
you know. So I don't
I
know.
would use it like the reefs and whatnot. It was
Yes.
my favorite out on the reefs.
Yeah. Were you putting it
Where's
on like a 1 ounce, 2 ounce head or
Yeah, I was putting it on like a Spro or I think I was putting it on a Spro.
yeah.
I think
Yeah, I'm
whatever
telling
I
you,
could.
that style of bait, like the jerk, I mean, that's pretty much all I use now is the 6 inch jerk shad and only in white. That's like, I've got 3 boxes of 6 inch jerk shads in white. Not because of the
Yeah.
white color, but because the white seems the perfect texture. It's not too
Mm,
hard, it's not too soft.
hmm
It has like the right action, you know. But anyway, that kind of straight tail to me is a lot more versatile because you can glide it, you can fish it slow, but if you needed to generate that acceleration, you could. Whereas if you have like a curly tail, like that slows it down, you
hmm
know, and you can't like a mullet or a grub is gonna fall like 3 times slower than a jerk shad. Jerk shad is just
True.
gonna rocket to the bottom,
hmm
you know, and sometimes I feel like that's very important, you
Mm.
know. And if you want to slow it down, you just put tension on your line while it's falling, so you can still slow it down. But
Mm.
you know, I don't think I can't remember the last time I used a mullet. The 5 inch mullet was my other go-to gulp, you know, especially
Yeah, I
when
like the
the
mullets.
yeah
I
when the
kind of like all the gulps
yeah
except for those squids, you know?
yeah those
But yeah,
squids
the only ones I buy these days are like the grubs, 6 inch grubs, 5 inch grubs. I buy some gulp shrimp. I like the gulp shrimp still.
interesting
The gulp
interesting
shrimp is like looks so stupid in the water, but
yeah
like
yeah
well,
interesting, you know,
a
like you
lot of
said.
times just like the stupidest looking stuff works like really
Yeah,
well.
I generally feel like when that works, the fish are just committing suicide, and
Yeah, maybe so.
you know,
I mean, but
but
then again, like with the albie snack and stripers, it's like they're not hitting anything, but then you can only get them on a snack, you know?
so what do you think? I mean, is it the fall rate of that weightless plastic?
It just like irritates them a certain kind of way, like suspending.
Right.
I mean, like maybe a weightless Zoom Fluke or whatever would do the same thing, or like a Sluggo, but like something about that, I don't know.
I mean, I know, and I've seen this before. Like the only time I see striped bass up close are the resident summer fish that are eating like mole crabs,
Yeah.
and those are like they will all turn on whatever I'm using for fluke. Like they'll all turn on it and none of them will touch it. Like I've caught like two in my
Hmm.
entire life, seeing those fish going up and down the shoreline, you
Yeah.
know, and then the next time the same pod, because I think what they do is like they'll swim up and then they'll turn and they'll swim back down. And the next pod, like only one fish will turn on the bait.
Hmm.
And the next time they just ignore it altogether. And my
I feel
friend
like those are
who's
the hardest
yeah,
bass
my
to
friend who's
catch.
striper fish, he was like, those are the smartest stripers that you'll
Yeah.
ever see.
Those are like the hardest.
Yeah,
You need those like, yeah, like resident warm water bass or
yeah. I mean,
hard.
like they say, like that's when you have to free line like mole crabs on a small circle hook and like 8 pound fluoro to get those
Yeah.
fish. You know.
Yeah. Right. Then you have to like a lot of times those like resident warm water stripers, like you need bait, you know.
Yeah.
If you can get them when their guards down, like certain ideal conditions, you could get them on lures, and then like the
Yes.
rest of the time, like they're not gonna hit a frickin' jig or whatever.
No. Definitely. I mean, at least not like nothing consistent. Like you said, like
Yeah.
one out of 100. You know, because I've caught them before, but I've never caught one sight casting to them.
Hmm.
Like I think when they're that close to shore, they're so wary.
They're
I
so
think
keyed in on whatever they're
yeah,
eating.
they're keyed in and they're also just like on high alert because
Yeah,
you
they've
know,
probably been pressured. Like they
yeah,
probably already got caught a couple times.
yep, yep. And they're like they're pressured from people and I always feel like bird of prey are such a huge deal in shallow water.
Mm,
You know, and fish are so like just like they're programmed to avoid like in in freshwater when I first started fishing seriously for bass, one of the first things I learned was how important wind is to break up the surface of the water. It's
to
like
get them to
when it
chew.
yeah, like when it's glass calm, everything is 10 times more difficult.
It
Yeah,
is
like
everything.
in the shallows. Out deep is
Yeah.
a little bit different, but you know, anytime
Still
like
tough. Even
yeah,
like everything.
yeah, but then once you get like that chop on the water and some noise, and you know, if it's like actually like small waves on a lake, then those fish will eat a spinner bait. Like they'll eat anything stupid like that. But
Right.
you know,
Even with the tunas.
okay, yeah, that's
You
very
go out there on a
interesting.
slick, calm day, like I mean, this past season, there was days when it was rough and like boats that could get out there were catching like a ton of tunas, like 20 to 50 or 60 in a day, like jigging, like just all you want tunas. And then the wind
Interesting.
calmed down and like 3, 4 days later, the fleet's on it. And I mean, the fleet might have something to do with it, but like it never happens like that.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah, I
like you're
wonder
grinding.
why that is with tuna.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
Maybe it's just the fleet, but
yeah,
caught him
but
really good on like one time on a slick calm day.
right.
So maybe it's just like a fleet thing.
Yeah, it could
But they
be.
chew better when it's shitty.
Right, right.
But like tug, same shit, you know? Like maybe
That's
fluke. Like
interesting.
I feel like everything it's kind of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when they're shallow enough to be threatened by birds, you know, that might be a different category of thing. But
Yeah.
but you're right about tog because one of my best, I mean, by far my best hogging day was right before a thunderstorm rolled through. And you know how
Mm.
people say like that low pressure gets fish biting? That's the
Yeah.
first and last time I experienced that at that like unquestionably. I mean, it was like before your crab gets even halfway to the bottom, they were getting crushed, you know, and
Yeah.
then I almost died out there, but it was worth it because I mean that storm came out of nowhere, and I was in my inflatable Hobie, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah,
but that was such
that's not
epic
good.
talking. I mean, like I went through like one of those quart things of Asian crabs in like an hour and a half, and it was just
Yeah.
one after another.
Yeah.
And I never experienced that again. So
Damn.
it's
There's always like exceptions to the rule where
yeah,
like a flick calm day could be really good, but
yes,
in general, like very often it's like if it's slick calm and sunny, like it's the kiss of death, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Like for like on the party boats up here, Rhode Island tug, and like everyone's like all hype on that. And like you come out here on like a slick calm sunny day, a lot of times it's really tough. And like
That's so
you have to
interesting with
dig
Tog. I've never. I mean, how deep are you guys fishing at that point in the season that you notice that pattern?
any depth. Well, maybe not like the deep, deep, but like up
Right.
to like, we don't really fish much over like 70 feet.
Well, I mean that's fucking deep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that day. I mean, most of my togging on the kayak is like 8 to 15 feet. You know, so
Mm.
like whatever wave action definitely affects them at that depth.
They just seem more,
Yeah. I mean,
they can see everything, feel everything. I don't know. When it's like shitty out, it's usually when the fishing's good.
that could be a pressure thing like people say, right? Like there's a more optimal pressure for them to
Like a barometer.
yeah.
Could be.
You know, because I don't see any direct linkage to that. When I first started kayak fishing in freshwater, I was hiding from the wind a lot because
Mm.
it's more comfortable to fish out of the wind. So I always go to like the lee shore, you know, like the lee side of the lake that's like, you know, being hidden. But now
Yeah.
it's the opposite. Like,
Yeah.
especially in the spring when if you want to catch fish on reaction base, like, you know, like crankbait, jerkbait, like that kind of shit, like you got to go into the wind. Because,
Right.
you know, if you're on the calm side of the lake, like you got to throw like a drop shot or, you know, something stupid like that. But
Finesse.
yeah,
Find the
yeah,
leader.
yeah. And I just, like, I can't do it. Like, I don't want to catch any fish I don't have to catch on a jig because I've used jigs. Like jigs are by far like 90% of all the fish I've ever caught in my life. So now it's like anything else, you know. But listen, Chris, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully
Yeah.
we'll, maybe touch base again like halfway through the season. I would
Yeah.
love to see if my schedule allows me to come up there for tuna or
Yeah.
even just a shot at it. Like I understand that tuna is no guarantee, even the weather window, but that would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Keep that
yeah.
in mind.
All right. All right. Cool. Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
man.
yeah, I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Take care.
Later.